point. Kinsey said it was 9 pedophiles. That's what he wrote. And it certainly would have been at least 9, because we now know from Yorkshire Television that Kinsey was working with a group of pedophiles.
There was also a pedophile organization in this country. They cooperated with us, and some of them who were not, of course, not incarcerated, they came and gave us information.
Dr. Reisman believes the pedophile organization mentioned by Gebhardt may have been the nucleus for what would become NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. While child molestation is a crime in any circumstance, the members of NAMBLA claim that their intentions are out of love for the children they molest. Yet this cover of a NAMBLA bulletin, which they called their back-to-school issue, paints quite a different picture. It shows a frightened boy cornered by 2 adult men who are about to force him into sexual contact, and is more consistent with the information found in the Kinsey reports, that children are in fact being raped and tormented by the pedophiles who prey upon them. To this day, NAMBLA looks to Alfred Kinsey as their inspiration, saying that gay liberationists in general, and boy lovers in particular, should know Kinsey's work and hold it dear. Implicit in Kinsey is the struggle we fight today.
Well, there's a huge connection between Alfred Kinsey and NAMBLA. In fact, NAMBLA has relied upon Kinsey's research for years. Kinsey tried to make pedophilia seem acceptable.
Kinsey's argument was that it was society's reaction to pedophiles that caused the real trauma of child molestation. Members of NAMBLA will often refer to this quote from Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, where Kinsey wrote that when children are constantly warned by parents and teachers against contacts with adults, they are ready to become hysterical as soon as any older person approaches, or stops and speaks to them in the street, or fondles them. Some of the more experienced students of juvenile problems have come to believe that the emotional reactions of the parents, police officers, and other adults who discover that the child has had such a contact may disturb the child more seriously than the sexual contacts themselves. The current hysteria over sex offenders may very well have serious effects on the ability of many of these children to work out sexual adjustments some years later.
In Kinsey's view, a lot of sex crime was really not crime at all. He seemed to worship sexual experience. I mean, he had a 24/7 obsession with sex long before he attained the position at Indiana University. So for him, all forms of sexual experience, to one degree or another, could have merit that were outside the pale of traditional morality.
Many researchers have come to believe that it was this philosophy that allowed Kinsey and his team to communicate with active child molesters and even train them to record their abuse in a scientific manner. While the Kinsey Institute continues to deny this, further evidence is found from the testimony of Dr. Clarence Tripp on the Phil Donahue Show. Listen carefully as Tripp confirms that there were multiple pedophiles, not just one, and says that they were trained observers that used stopwatches.
I'm going to say that once more, and if I'm wrong, let them sue me. He said oral and manual techniques were used on those children. What American is going to defend that?
How does C.A. Tripp respond to that?
She's talking about data that came from pedophiles, that he would listen to only pedophiles who were very careful, used stopwatches, knew how to record their things, did careful surveys, and these she resents very much, but they're very important.
So he interviewed people who were known criminals. I assume, were they in prison at the time?
Oh, certainly not, but they were, in her sense, criminals because they were pedophiles, but they were trained observers.
Oh, in her sense, they were criminals because they were pedophiles. They're raping children and they're not criminals. You're going to defend that?
Nobody was raping children. What they were doing...
What do you call sexually, manually, and orally abusing a baby, and you're a bloody pedophile?
We also have an interview that was a phone interview that I have a copy of. It's in my book, between Gebhardt and Dr. Muir, who was my editor, in which Gebhardt admits that they told the pedophiles to use stopwatches.
The interview Dr. Reisman refers to took place on November 2, 1992, between Dr. Gordon Muir and Paul Gebhardt. Dr. Muir also appeared on The Donahue Show as the editor of the book Kinsey, Sex and Fraud. On the show, he confronted Clarence Tripp.
And you're telling me that Kinsey came across in an interview sample of 5,300 people, he found pedophiles who had stopwatches, just happened to have stopwatches, just happened to have all that data handy?
Some 2 years later, in a phone interview, Dr. Muir would pursue a similar line of questioning with Paul Gebhardt, one of the original co-authors of the Kinsey reports, who succeeded Alfred Kinsey as the original director of the Kinsey Institute. Listen carefully how Gebhardt admits that there were multiple pedophiles that he and Kinsey worked with, how they actually encouraged some of the adults to molest children, and that it was at the instruction of Kinsey and his team that they used stopwatches.
Table 32. Yeah, the table's all right, but these all were done with stopwatches necessarily. It says below table 32, the legend says duration of stimulation before climax. Observation timed with second hand or stopwatch. So second hand or stopwatch. Okay, well that's, you refreshed my memory. I had no idea that it was used on that many. Well, my question to you is this. Who did that? Who did the timing? It was dependent on who it was. Most of it was done by one individual. A man with some scientific training, but not a known scientist. The other cases were done by parents at our suggestion. And let's see, then there were some that were done by nursery school personnel. Was that at your suggestion too? Yes. When these people would report to us, they saw childhood sexual activity. We asked them to watch it and take notes, and if possible, time it and report back to us. Some of the stimulation was clearly being done by adults themselves, isn't that correct? Yes, that was pedophiles. Or it was particularly one man, but there were several pedophiles that gave us data. But since they were all doing the same thing and reporting on the same thing and taking the same measurements, it looks like it was organized ahead of time, is that right? No. No, we just simply asked anyone who had any data on childhood sexuality to tell us about it. Well, what about the cases then, which it says in the book, some of them were followed up for several years to make sure that true orgasm was involved? That looks like prospective planning there. But not on our part. You mean pedophiles just took it upon themselves to do follow-up experiments to find out true orgasms were involved? No. We had some. Try this again.
At this stage of the interview, Gebhardt engages in a bit of wordplay, but listen carefully as Dr. Muir gets to the point with him.
Once we asked people about giving us their observations, we would ask them later too. In other words, if there were some pedophiles who reported their data to us, and if they got in contact with us later, we would then ask more about it. We follow up on by re-interviewing people occasionally. We call them retakes. I think
to know who these children are, how their parents were involved, and have we talked to those children now as adults?
When I wrote to the Kinsey Institute and I asked, what about these children? They just casually wrote me back. Gebhard casually wrote me back that, well, we never had any follow-up on these children. It was too expensive, he said, or just impossible. What does he mean there's never been a follow-up? You just talked about men who are raping children, at least 317 children. Now we're looking at, it comes up to maybe 2,035 at